I never thought my life could change so much in just one day, but that's exactly what happened on a Tuesday in April. It started like any other tough day at work. I'm a financial advisor at a big city firm, and that morning my biggest client called to say he was taking all his money out. Then I spilled coffee all over my white shirt right before a big presentation. To make things worse, my boss embarrassed me in front of the whole department for a small mistake in a report. By the time 5 o'clock came around, I was ready to go home, grab a beer, and forget the day. But if I had known what was waiting for me, I wouldn't have been so eager. When I got home to our big house, the one my wife Olivia insisted we buy even though it was too big for us, I was about to walk in when I heard voices through a slightly open window. Olivia was talking in that excited way she does when she's gossiping with her sister. "We did it 3 times today," she said. "Once in the morning after Jack left for work, again at lunch, and just an hour ago. I forgot how good Derek is in bed." I froze, my hand still on the doorknob. Derek was Olivia's ex-boyfriend from college, the one who broke her heart. What was she talking about? "Don't worry, Jack won't find out," said Sophia, her sister. "He's too busy with work to notice anything." Then Olivia said something that hit me hard. "I've decided to stop pretending. I'm filing for divorce." "Olivia, divorce after only 3 years of marriage?" Sophia asked, her voice hesitant. "Is that really wise?" Olivia replied smugly. "Oh, don't worry. I got it all figured out. California is a community property state," she continued. "That means I'm entitled to half of everything, including all those assets he inherited when his father died last year. Once the divorce is final," she added, "I'll be set for life. And Derek, I can finally be together without having to hide the fact that we're together." I stumbled backwards reading from what I just heard. The woman I pledged to love and cherish till death us part had been cheating on me. And now she was planning to leave me and take half of everything I owned in the process. I somehow managed to get back in my car without making a sound. I peeled out of the driveway and just started. I drove aimlessly, my mind racing. How long had this been going on? How could I have been so blind? The signs were there if I was honest with myself. Olivia always seemed distracted and not interested when we were together. She kept coming up with reasons why she didn't want to be close or intimate. There were also those quiet conversations that stopped the moment I walked into the room. I started thinking back to when we first got together. We met at a charity event not long after I started working at the firm. Olivia was incredibly beautiful, charming, and seemed really into me. Things moved fast after that. Within 6 months, we were engaged, and less than a year after our first date, we had a big wedding. At the time, I was so caught up in the excitement that I ignored the little voice in my head saying it was all happening too quickly. I suddenly realized that Olivia had been playing me from the start. She'd seen a naive rich boy and decided to sink her claws in. As the initial shock, I felt cold anger start to set in. Was I going to let her get away with this? I may have been a fool, but I wasn't about to let her ruin me financially too. I pulled into the parking lot of a 24-hour diner and tried to calm down. I went to the diner and tried to calm my racing thoughts enough to come up with a plan. I needed to act fast before Olivia could file those divorce papers. First things first, I needed a lawyer and a good one. I scrolled through my contacts until I found the number for Ethan Goldstein. He was the best divorce attorney in the state and had helped my college roommate through. "Ethan, it's Jack Thorne. I need your help and I need it fast. How soon can you meet?" I was sitting across from Ethan in a private booth at the back of the diner, telling him the whole story. He listened without judging me, only interrupting to ask for more details. When I finished, Ethan leaned back and steepled his fingers. "Jack, here's what we're going to do. First, we need to secure your assets before your wife can touch them. I'm going to put you in touch with a forensic accountant I know. He'll help us track down and document every penny that's rightfully yours." He grabbed a legal pad and started writing quickly. "Next, we need to file for divorce ourselves before she does. That way, we control the story from the beginning. We'll use infidelity as the reason, which will help us when dividing assets." I nodded, feeling a small sense of hope for the first time since I overheard Olivia's conversation. "What about the house and our shared property?" I asked. "Leave that to me," Ethan said confidently. "I've got a few strategies that should give us the advantage. Do you have a place to stay for the next few days? It's better if you're not at the house when we serve her the papers." I thought for a moment. Yeah, I can crash in my buddy Mike's place. He's got a spare room. Perfect. Go there now. And pack a bag with anything essential you might need. Try to act normal if you run into your wife. We don't want to tip our hand just yet. I thanked Ethan profusely and headed out. My mind was reeling from how quickly my life had changed. Just that morning, I'd been a happily married man, or so I thought. Now I was plotting a divorce strategy in a diner booth. I got home, and the house was quiet. I figured Olivia had gone to bed. I went up to our bedroom and quickly packed a duffel bag with clothes and toiletries. As I was about to leave, I saw the photo frame on my nightstand. It showed Olivia and me on our honeymoon in Blay, grinning widely as we posed in front of a beautiful sunset. I picked up the frame and I stared at it, looking for any sign that it had all been a lie. All I saw were two people who looked blissfully in love. I sighed and put the photo face down, quietly leaving the room. The next few days flew by in a rush of meetings with lawyers, accountants, and bank managers. I focused completely on sorting out our finances, which was easier than dealing with the emotional pain of my marriage falling apart. Finally, everything was ready. I had managed to protect most of my assets, including my inheritance, and Ethan had filed the divorce papers. He was going to serve them to Olivia that afternoon. I decided to be there when it happened. I wanted to see the look on her face when she realized her plan had completely backfired. I quietly let myself into the house and headed to the kitchen. I could hear Olivia humming to herself as she chopped vegetables for dinner. It made my chest ache to see her like this. How many times had I come home to find her like this? She thought she was preparing a meal for her husband, but she was really counting down the minutes until she could be with her lover again. I cleared my throat, and she turned with a look of surprise on her face. "Jack, you're home early. I wasn't expecting you, for another hour at least." She must have sensed something was off because her brow furrowed in concern. "Everything okay? You look upset." I've opened my mouth to reply, but was cut off by the sound of the doorbell. "I'll get it." I headed for the front door and opened it to find Ethan's assistant standing there with a thick envelope. "Olivia Thorne," she asked briskly. "She's inside," I replied, stepping back to let her in. Olivia appeared in the hallway, wiping her hands on a dish towel. "Can I help you?" The assistant held out the envelope. "Olivia Thorne, you've been served." Olivia's face drained of color as she took the envelope with trembling hands. She looked at me confused. "Jack, what's going on?" I crossed my arms and leaned against the wall. "Why did you open it?" I asked, watching her fingers shake. She tore open the envelope and quickly read what was inside. I saw the exact moment she understood. Her eyes widened in shock, and her mouth dropped open. "You're divorcing me? But how did you?" She stopped speaking as it all sank in. "You know that you've been your ex." Olivia was shocked to discover that her boyfriend had been planning to bleed her dry in the divorce. She was even angrier to find out that he had been going through her things. Olivia paled even further. "Jack, please let me explain. It's not what you think. I don't want to talk about this anymore." I went upstairs to get the rest of my things as I was packing up the last of my clothes. Olivia appeared in the doorway. "Where are you going to go?" she asked in a small voice. I zipped up my suitcase harder than I needed to. "That's none of your concern anymore," I told her. "Jack, please," she pleaded, grabbing my arm as I tried to leave the room. "Can we talk about it? Let's talk about this. I know I made a mistake, but I love you. We can work through this together." Part of me wanted to believe her and think there was a way to save our marriage. But then I remembered how casually she had told me about her cheating and how she laughed at how clueless I was. After everything I heard, I asked her to let me go. "Olivia, I can't do this. You don't love me. You never did. I was just a way for you to get what you wanted." Tears streamed down her face. "That's not true. I did love you. I still do. It was a mistake. Please give me another chance." But I was already halfway down the stairs, my suitcase bumping against each step. "Goodbye, Olivia. I hope you and Derek are very happy together." I walked out the front door and heard her sobbing behind me. I got in my car and drove away without looking back. The next few weeks were a blur. I stayed with my friend Mike, sleeping on his lumpy couch and trying to put my life back together. The divorce proceedings dragged on with Olivia fighting tooth and nail, and she tried to get as much as she could, But thanks to Ethan's skill and the evidence of her infidelity, she ended up with far less than she'd hoped as everything started to settle down. I realized I needed a fresh start. The thought of staying in the city, potentially running into Olivia or being surrounded by reminders of our life together was unbearable. I'd always had a secret fantasy of living on a ranch, spending my days working with my hands instead of staring at spreadsheets. It seemed as good a time as any to make that dream a reality. After some research, I found a cattle ranch about 3 hours outside the city. It was looking for hands, and the pay wasn't great, but room and board were included. It would be a big change from my corporate lifestyle, but that's exactly what I wanted. I called up the ranch owner, a gruff-sounding man named Bill, and arranged to come out for a trial period. 2 days later, I was driving down a dusty road in my city SUV, watching the urban sprawl give way to rolling hills and open plains as I pulled up to the main house. A man in his 60s, who looked like he'd seen better days, came out to greet me. "This must be Bill," he said, looking me up and down, taking in my pressed clothes and loafers. "You Jack?" he asked, sounding a bit rough. I nodded, suddenly feeling out of place. "That's me," I said. "Thanks for having me out here, Bill." He grunted. "Don't thank me yet, still got to see if you can hack it. Have you ever worked on a ranch before?" "No, I haven't. But I'm a hard worker, and I learn quickly." He raised an eyebrow. "We'll see about that. Come on, I'll show you where you'll be staying." As Bill introduced me, he said, "This is Jack. He's going to try out for a spot with us." Then he left me to get settled. I smiled awkwardly at my new bunkmates, aware of how I probably looked. One of the men, a tall guy around my age with a thick mustache, reached out his hand. "Welcome aboard. I'm Tom." I shook his hand and said, "Nice to meet you, Tom. Thanks for having me." "Don't thank us yet," he said with a grin. "You'll see what Bill has planned for you tomorrow." The other men chuckled ominously at that. I gulped, wondering what I had gotten myself into. I didn't have to wait long to find out. We were all up before dawn the next morning after a quick breakfast of eggs and coffee. Bill, who'd been in town, said, "Let's see how you do with Diablo," and led me to a massive black stallion in one of the stalls. The horse snorted and tossed its head as if sensing my fear. I looked at Bill in alarm. "You want me to ride that?" I asked. "No, I just want you to get a saddle on him," he replied. I glanced around at the other ranch hands, who were watching with poorly concealed amusement. Clearly, this was some kind of initiation ritual. Taking a deep breath, I walked over to the stall. I went over to the stall, and Diablo's ears flattened against his head, and he bared his teeth menacingly. I said in what I hoped was a soothing tone, "Let's be friends, okay?" I reached out to pat his neck, and he snapped at my hand. I jerked back just in time to avoid losing a finger. The other men burst out laughing. Even Bill smiled. "Maybe we should start you off with something a little tamer," he said, taking pity on me. He led me over to a gentle-looking mare named Buttercup. Over the next few hours, Bill and the others showed me the basics of caring for and riding horses. By lunchtime, I was sore in places I didn't know. I was covered in dust and sweat, and sporting what was sure to be an impressive array of bruises. But I was also exhilarated in a way I hadn't felt in years. We moved on to fixing fences, which I thought would be easier than riding horses. However, I quickly realized that using a post-hole digger was tough. By the time dinner came, my hands were covered in blisters, and every muscle in my body hurt. We sat around a long table in the bunkhouse, eating a hearty meal of beef stew and cornbread. I noticed Bill watching me with a thoughtful look. "You did okay today, Jack," Bill said with a little grin. For someone used to the city, I managed a tired smile. "Thanks. I have a lot to learn, but I'm enjoying it so far." He nodded approvingly. "That's the right attitude. We'll make a rancher out of you yet." As the days turned into weeks, I slowly began to find my footing on the ranch. The work was backbreaking and the hours were long, but I was surprised to find myself thriving in ways I never had in my previous office job. There was something deeply satisfying about collapsing to bed each night, muscles aching from honest work. I also started to bond with the other ranch hands. Tom in particular took me under his wing, patiently showing me the ropes and laughing with me. I couldn't help but laugh at my own mistakes. You should have seen your face the first time you had to help Berthico. He chuckled one evening as we sat on the porch, beers in hand, after a long day's work. I groaned at the memory. I still have nightmares about that. I had no idea that so much goop could come out of one animal. Tom gave me a pat on the shoulder and said, "You did well. You kept your cool and got the job done. That's what matters out here." His words made me realize that I'd been so focused on proving myself that I hadn't realized how much I'd come to value the respect and camaraderie of these men as spring turned to summer. I found myself getting into the swing of things on the ranch. I still had moments of usually when I was knee-deep in manual work or trying to wrestle a stubborn steer, but they were becoming fewer and farther between. One sweltering afternoon in July, Bill called me over as I was finishing my chores. "Jack, I need you to go into town to get some supplies. The feed store called and said our order came in early, so they need the space." He asked if I could handle the big truck. I nodded, trying not to show how happy I was to be trusted with this task. "No problem, boss. I'll head out now." I was glad to stop doing physical work on the ranch. I drove down the dusty roads with the windows down, listening to country music on the radio. I thought about how much my life had changed in just a few months. I was no longer wearing designer suits or going to power lunches. My hands were calloused, and my skin was bronze from the sun. I had lost the soft belly I used to have. I'd had too many business dinners and replaced them with long muscle. I felt different on the inside, too. The constant stress and pressure of my old life had melted away, replaced by a sense of purpose and contentment. I was so lost in thought that I almost missed the turn for the feed store, cursing under my breath. I swerved at the last second, only to be met with an annoyed honk from the car behind me as I backed the truck up to the loading dock. A short brunette in shorts and a plaid shirt tied at the waist came out to greet me. "You must be from Rocking Bee," she said with a friendly smile. "I'm Sarah. My dad owns the store." I hopped out of the truck, suddenly very aware of my sweaty appearance. "Jack." Dirt street appearance. "Nice to meet you, Sarah. I'm Jack. You're new around here, aren't you, Sarah? I don't remember seeing you before." "Jack, I started the ranch a couple of months ago. I'm still learning the ropes," I said. "Wow, what made you decide to become a ranch hand?" Sarah asked. I hesitated because I wasn't sure how much to share. I had been looking for a change and wanted to try something completely different. She must have noticed my reluctance, so she quickly changed the subject. We chatted easily as we finished loading the truck, and I found myself enjoying her company more than I had in a long time. Sarah paused for a moment before saying, "Hey, some of us locals are having a bonfire at Miller Pond on Saturday night. You should come if you're not busy. It'd be a good chance to meet more people in town." I was surprised by the invitation. I've been so focused on my work at the ranch that I hadn't given much thought to socializing. "Great, I'll try to make it," I said. "I'll look forward to seeing you there," Sarah replied. "It starts around 8. Just follow the dirt road past the old Johnson place, and you can't miss it." As I drove back to the ranch, my mind was buzzing. Was this a date? Did I even want it to be a date? The idea of getting involved with someone so soon after Olivia made me uneasy. But then again, maybe it was a good thing. I realized it was time to move on. When I got back to the ranch, I was still feeling down. I started unloading the feed, and Tom wandered over to help. He asked how the trip into town was. I said it was fine, but I hesitated before adding that I'd been invited to a bonfire on Saturday night. Tom's eyebrows shot up. "Let me guess," he said. "Sarah from the feed store?" I nodded, surprised. "How do you know?" He chuckled. "I've been watching you. Sarah's been in my circle since she moved back from college. She's a nice girl. You should go." I rubbed the back of my neck awkwardly. It's been a while since I've done any dating. To be honest, I'm not sure I'm ready. Tom gave me a knowing look. "This has anything to do with why you left the city?" "I guess it's about why you left the city." I let out a little sigh. Sometimes I forget how perceptive Tom can be. He could say that he was quiet for a moment as we finished unloading. Then he said, "Jack, I don't know what happened to you before you came here. You don't have to tell me if you don't want to. I know you don't want to, but I do think that isolating yourself isn't the answer. Why not go to the bonfire and have some fun? You don't have to marry the girl. You just need to enjoy being around people your own age for a change." I'm going to stick to his advice for the rest of the week. By Saturday, I decided to take his advice and borrow Tom's old Chevy, since my own car was far too flashy for a casual bonfire. I drove into town and found the bonfire already in full swing. A group of about 20 people were gathered around a roaring fire drinking beer and roasting marshmallows to the sounds of country music. We played music from someone's pickup truck, and the air was filled with laughter and chatter. I saw Sarah talking to a group of girls and made my way over. Her face lit up when she saw me. "Check you made it," she said, giving me a quick hug. "Come on, let me introduce you to everyone." The next few hours flew by with introductions, jokes, and stories. I started to relax and genuinely enjoy myself for the first time in months. These people were so different from my old friends in the city. They were down to earth, friendly, and real. As the night went on, Sarah and I ended up sitting a little apart from the others, our shoulders touching as we looked into the fire. She said softly, "Are you ever going to tell me the real reason you left the city to become a ranch hand?" I looked at her, surprised, and asked, "What makes you think there's more to the story?" "Jack, I grew up in a small town. I know the look of someone running from something. Plus, you still have the tan. Rains. No real cowboy would be caught dead in brand new Wranglers." I laughed, caught off guard by her perceptiveness. "You're busted. There's more to the story, but it's not a happy one." Sarah's expression softened. "Sometimes talking about it helps, but only if you want to. Maybe it was the beer, the warmth of the fire, or just the fact that I was tired of carrying the weight of my secret alone. Whatever the reason, I found myself opening up to Sarah about everything: my failed marriage, Olivia's betrayal, and my impulsive decision to start over at the ranch." Sarah listened without interrupting, finding mine in the darkness when I finished. She was quiet for a long moment. "Wow, that's quite a story. I'm sorry you had to go through all that." I shrug and play it off. "It is what it is. I'm doing better now, I think. The ranch has been good for me," I said. She squeezed my hand. "I'm glad. I think you're really brave. Not many people would have the courage to start over like that." Her words moved me, and I felt a lump in my throat. "Thanks," I said. "That means a lot." We sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the fire fade to glowing embers. As people started to head home, Sarah turned to me with a shy smile. "Listen, I know you're probably not looking for anything serious right now, but I really like you. Jack, would you maybe want to go out sometime, just as friends, if that's all you're comfortable with?" I hesitated, torn between the attraction and the fear of getting hurt again. But then I remembered Tom's advice about not isolating myself. "I'd like that," I said finally, "but you're right, I'm not ready for anything serious yet. Is that okay?" Sarah nodded. "More than okay. We'll take it slow." I drove back to the ranch that night with a spring in my step. I felt like I could take on the world. Opening up to Sarah had helped me let go of some of the pin-up emotions I'd been carrying around. The prospect of exploring a new relationship, even if it was just friendship for now, gave me something to look forward to over the next few weeks. Sarah and I started spending more time together. We'd meet for coffee or town on my days off, or she'd come out to the ranch to watch me work and laugh at my still occasional mishaps. True to her word, we kept things casual and friendly, but I could feel myself starting to open up more to trust again. One evening in late, Sarah and I were walking along the fence line of the ranch, watching the sun set over the hills. We'd been talking and laughing about nothing in particular when Sarah suddenly grew serious. "Jack," she said, stopping and turning to face me. "I need to tell you something." My heart skipped a beat. Had she grown tired of waiting for me to be ready for more? Was she going to break up with me? I asked, trying to sound calm. Sarah took a deep breath. "I got a job offer in Chicago. It's a great opportunity, something I've been working toward for a long time, but I'm not sure I want to take it." I blinked, surprised. This wasn't what I expected. I thought she would say something different. She looked up at me, her eyes shining in the fading light. "If it's such a great opportunity, I think I'm falling in love with you, and I don't want to leave if there's a chance you might feel the same way." I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. I was flooded with a whirlwind of emotions: fear, excitement, doubt, and hope. "Sarah," I trailed off, unsure of what to say. She held up a hand, saying, "You don't have to answer right now. I know this is a lot to take in, just think about it. The job doesn't start for another month. It was time to make a decision." I nodded silently, my mind reeling. Sarah gave me a small smile and a quick kiss on the cheek before heading back to her car. That night, I tossed and turned, unable to sleep. Sarah's confession had forced me to confront feelings I'd been trying to ignore. The truth was that I cared for her deeply. She'd become an important part of my life here, bringing laughter and light back into my world when I thought it was gone forever. But was I ready to open my heart again? The pain of Olivia's betrayal was still fresh, and I was still afraid of being hurt. But the thought of Sarah leaving or losing her was even more painful. When dawn broke, I made my decision. I got dressed quickly and drove into town, stopping to pick up coffee and Sarah's favorite cinnamon rolls from the local bakery. When I knocked on her door, Sarah opened it and said, "Jack, what are you doing here?" I held out the coffee and pastries, hoping we could talk. She let me in, and we sat at her small kitchen table. I took a deep breath to gather my courage. "Sarah, I've been doing a lot of thinking about us in the future, and I realized something. I'm not just worried about you leaving. I'm also worried because I think I'm falling in love with you too." Sarah's eyes widened. "Jack!" I raised my hand to stop her, wanting to say everything I needed to. "I know I've been hesitant. I'm scared of getting hurt again. But you've shown me that not everyone is like Olivia. You've been patient, kind, and understanding. You've helped me remember what it feels like to trust someone and let them in." I reached across the table and took her hand. "I can't promise it'll be easy, but I'm willing to give it a try. It'll be fine. I've still got a lot of issues to work through, but if you're willing to be patient with me a little longer, I'd like to give us a real shot." Tears were streaming down Sarah's face now, but she was smiling. "Oh, Jack, of course I'm willing. I'd wait forever for you if I had to." I went over to her and stood up to give her a hug and kiss. I felt like I could finally let my walls down. I knew there'd still be challenges, but for the first time in a long time, I was excited about the future. 5 years later, I wiped the sweat from my brow as I finished mending the fence in the south pasture. The summer sun beat down mercilessly, but I hardly noticed. My mind was on the dinner waiting for me back at the house. So much had changed in the past 5 years. Sarah turned down the job in Chicago and chose to stay. We dated for a year before getting engaged, and now we've been happily married for 3 years. Bill retired last year and sold the ranch to Tom and me. It was a big change to go from ranch hand to owner, but I loved it. The work was still hard, but it felt good because I knew that everything I fixed and every animal I cared for was part of something that belonged to me. As I walked back to the house, I smiled when I saw Sarah on the porch with our 6-year-old daughter, Emma. She waved at me as I came up the steps. "Dinner's almost ready," she said. "Why didn't you go get cleaned up?" I went up the steps and gave her a quick kiss, then a soft kiss on Emma's downy head. "Yes, ma'am," I said with a wink as I headed inside to shower. I looked in the mirror and saw a face that was tanned and weathered from years of outdoor work. I could see the laugh lines crinkling the corners of my eyes. I hardly recognized the slick city businessman I'd once been. Sometimes I thought about my old life and Olivia. I'd heard through the grapevine that things hadn't worked out with Derek. Last I knew, she was on her 3rd marriage and struggling financially. I felt a twinge of sadness for her, but no regret. Losing Olivia brought me to this life that I loved even more. I was surprised at how much I had changed. I went from being Sarah's boss to being Emma's dad, and now running the ranch. As I stepped into the shower and let the cool water wash away the dirt and sweat from the day, I quietly thanked the universe. I had lost everything once, but I gained so much more. Life has a strange way of working out sometimes. Later that night, I sat on the porch with Sarah, watching the stars come out over the ranch. I felt a deep sense of peace. This was where I belonged. This was my home. Second story. My husband hurt me emotionally when we were newly married. It really affected my confidence. His friend asked him if I was rich enough for him and if I was good enough for him, and he thought that was fine, even though she didn't have much herself. Before we got married, I felt pretty confident and smart. But after we married, I started feeling unattractive and like I wasn't good enough. In college and at work, people told me I knew how to stand up for myself and set boundaries. So, I'm confused about why this happened to me when I didn't do anything wrong. Now, I don't love him, but I'm slowly regaining my confidence and starting to feel beautiful again. However, I'm scared to get a divorce because we have a child together. Since I told him I have no feelings for him, He has been respectful. I keep thinking about trying to be friends so my son won't be affected and to avoid conflict with my mom. I know I'm all over the place, but any advice would really help.